The second half of the 2023 season has begun. So has Slasher Sports baseball coverage of the American League. Welcome to AL/Lines, a Slasher Sports baseball podcast, available on Spotify as well as on our YouTube channel. Steve Feck is my name. Talking baseball is my game. Each weekend, we'll take a look at the most interesting story from each AL division. Maybe a team, maybe a pitching staff or a lineup, maybe a trade or a prospect coming up. Probably will be something you haven't thought about, at least not from the points of view I'll throw out there for your consideration. Once you have, let us know what you think on Twitter at @SlasherBaseball. You can send us an email and perhaps suggest future show topics. That would be slasherbaseball@yahoo.com. And better yet, you can join our new and exploding Slasher Sports community on Discord. It's Major League Baseball, college sports, cinema, lifestyle. We have something for everyone. So make sure that you join the conversations, please. Okay, let's lead off our initial conversations about the AL in 2023. And we're going to follow the sun. We're going to go east to west. We're going to stop in the Central. I know a lot of people, a lot of fans of AL Central teams think that, people only talk about, the AL East and the AL West. We know there's a division there. Don't let the struggling records of some of your teams, discourage you. We know you're there. We know that you're important. We're going to talk about you. But rather than talking about the three division leaders or the teams that most pundits feel are going to be the biggest story, that have the most exciting players, or whatever the reason that they ignore, 9/10 of the American League and only focus on specific teams, we're going to take our look down into the cellar of each division. So we'll be looking at the Boston Red Sox, the Kansas City Royals, and at least for now, Oakland Athletics. Let's start over at Fenway Park and the Boston Red Sox. And before you Red Sox fans get up in arms and leave nasty comments or whatever it is, or start whining about the fact that, well, if the Red Sox were in the AL Central, we'd be in first place. Well, you know what? You knew when the season started. In fact, you knew when the season ended last year that you're not in the AL Central, you're in the AL East. And you have been since the beginning of divisional play in 1969. Okay, I mean, I get it. I get it that that's an easy excuse and an easier way to make you feel better about what is becoming a very positive story there in Boston. But I mean, I get it. Okay, I cover the Blue Jays for JasonTheCouch.com. I understand. That's one of the things that I hear most often that absolutely set me off and make me go ballistic. Oh, but we're in the AL East, it's unfair. If we were in another division, we wouldn't have this or that or this or that. Stop. They didn't just decide, Red Sox fans, just as spring training was closing, like just the day that camps closed, they didn't decide, oh, by the way, Heimblum, we're moving your team to the AL East. You guys knew what you were up against. And I would like to think that you, as a whole, are pretty happy about where the Red Sox are right now. Not only are they 6 games above 500 at 49 and 43 as we record this. I mean, you've gone 8-2 in the month of July. So things are looking good there. I mean, they really are. You're playing up to your Pythagorean record. And that's one of the few analytics that I actually take to heart and that I give a lot of credence to, because even though it's not just run differential, there are some other mathematical things that factor in there. I think it gives you a really nice snapshot based on what your offense is producing and what your pitching is preventing. It gives you an idea of what your team should be doing record-wise, and the Red Sox are what they are in the standings. Okay, you are dead on with your Pythagorean record. You do have a positive run differential. I think that's huge, especially considering, the injuries, to Sale and Garrett Whitlock and so many other pitchers. I think it's a huge feather in the cap of this Red Sox roster and of Alex Cora that this team continues to perform as well. I know it was kind of iffy in May and June. I know they were below 500 for June. They were I think they were a little bit above 500 for May. Not by much, but a little. So, I mean, there are some really positive signs. Verdugo leads your team in WAR. So again, people always decry trades of players for contract reasons or whatever. And it seems odd to say that about the Boston Red Sox, but they decry the trade of Mookie Betts, giving him away. Alex Verdugo leads your team in WAR. And that was one of the prime pieces coming back, in that deal from Mookie Betts. So I think that is terrific. You've got, Yoshida has been, for me, as someone that actually follows, professional baseball in Japan relatively closely as you realistically can. I mean, it's hard. Most websites are in Japanese. There are podcasts, but they tend to be kind of sporadic that talk about the league. So I try to get the info, the best I can. But Yoshida's everything that I hoped that he was going to be. He's hitting just enough power. I think he has 10 homers as we record this. I'd like to see his slugging be a little higher and his OPS be a little higher, but I think that's nitpicking. I mean, he carried this lineup early. He got off early, had that thing kind of carry over from the World Baseball Classic. He's a good outfielder. He's not a flashy outfielder. He's a good outfielder. It was a great free agent signing. He is a core piece, for the Red Sox going forward. I think you can feel comfortable with that with him and Verdugo. And even Duran, I think he had a great month of June, and he's hitting over 300. He's stealing bases. He looks a little more comfortable in the outfield, whereas last year, you probably needed to give him a GPS to be able to track down baseballs because he really had no clue, how to break on a ball early or whatever. But, he's coming through. Kosas, I think also, I don't think the Red Sox are willing to give up on one of their best prospects. You could arguably say he's their number one prospect. I don't think they're ready to give up on him. He is also starting to show signs of life, especially in this 8-2 July run the Red Sox have been on either side of the All-Star break. And then you have Rafael Devers. I mean, he is the man. 22 homers, 72 RBIs as we record this. His OPS, not bad, 809. I mean, I think maybe you expect a little bit better, from Rafael Devers. So people are saying, well, he's having a down year. Maybe it's the contract. No, he's Rafael Devers. And in a lot of ways, I mean, are teams really giving him, especially early on, were they giving him pitches to hit when he may have been the lone reliable run producer in that lineup? I would argue no, they weren't. I think now as other people around them are producing, pitchers have to kind of adjust their thing. I think Rafael Devers, is the cornerstone of this team. So, you have to be happy with how all of those people are performing. If Garrett Whitlock and Chris Sale can get healthy, and not only get healthy, stay healthy, and then prove that they can be effective. I mean, that those are three separate things that have to happen. Then the Red Sox, I think, can hang in it, into September. And you have to wonder with Chaim Bloom, he's happy with the team's performance. Again, he acquired a lot of these pieces. Whatever, we really haven't seen a whole lot of players that he's drafted, but I mean, he's assembled, this roster through trading of bets and various things, and he's got to be happy with this July surge. Now, he's not happy. He has to be pleased with this July surge. But I will offer up that similar to the situation in Pittsburgh with Ben Cherington. Oh, you Red Sox fans remember Ben Cherington, right? He's pleased with how the Pirates jumped off to that early lead and have played well above expectations. But you can't be happy because if you're Chaim Bloom, and he always emphasizes this, whether it be the offseason, in-season, coming up to the trade deadline, he's always emphasizing wanting to build a sustainable, long-term contending roster. You can take a GM out of Tampa Bay, but you can't take the Tampa Bay out of this GM. I mean, he has that philosophy that proved so successful when he held the reins in Tampa Bay. So you hate to argue with it, but for Red Sox fans, for Red Sox Nation, long-term sustainability is waiting until the next homestand to do well. There's a lot of pushback from the fans, and I think you're starting to see it in the media sources as well about this. The Red Sox have the money. Why are they not spending? It was different in Tampa Bay for Bloom because they didn't have the money. So they had to find a way and find a course of action that met with their very limited financial resources. That's not the case with the Red Sox. So you have to wonder how Bloom walks that little tightrope going into the trade deadline. He's certainly not rooting against his team to do well and to win between now and August 1st. That's not what I'm insinuating. If they would play 500 ball, does it make it a lot easier for Chaim Bloom? Oh, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely makes it easier for him. He can then, stick to his guns, stay the course, and perhaps sell. Maybe a Justin Turner can be moved for pieces. There are players on this roster that you could consider moving because they're not necessarily going to be there when the Red Sox are consistently competitive again, which seems odd to say about a team that's 6 games above 500. I know it sounds crazy to say, well, what do you mean? At this stage with this roster, unless they bring in some pitching reinforcements, they're going to have to do something if the Red Sox continue to show by their on-field performances that they can stay in at least the wild card race. I think it's safe to say they're not going to win the division. It's either going to be Tampa Bay or Baltimore, barring major injuries or barring, a collapse that no one foresees at this point. But the Red Sox, Baseball Reference, when they calculate their playoff odds, still have the Red Sox as a 29% chance of making the playoffs. Not much of a chance of getting to the World Series, but I think at this point, if you're just making the playoffs, if you're the Red Sox and Chaim Bloom and his front office, you've got to be really, really happy. Who do they go after? I'm guessing it has to be pitching. James Paxton has been just a godsend. He really, really has been. I'm not a big Hensley Jansen fan, but yeah, he saved a lot of games for a lot of teams and a lot of good contending teams. So, the pressure of Boston probably is not going to get to him in any way if he hits a rough patch. He's certainly had rough patches before, and he's come out the other end smelling like roses. So it'll be interesting. And then the thing to factor into all of this is that the Red Sox have played exceedingly well against the AL East. Now, it's hard to track that because you don't play nearly the divisional games that you used to based with this new schedule that I'm guessing is here to stay, as much as I hate that. I would think that fans of any team in the AL East, I would imagine that they don't like this idea because at this stage, they're all legitimate playoff teams. Obviously, some have better odds than others. But if you look at their record in the division, they're even with the Orioles. They were 3-3 against the Orioles, 5-1 against the Yankees. How huge is that if you're a Red Sox? I grew up a Red Sox fan, in Yankee, Mets, Phillies country. So I was beaten up by 3 different fan bases. But I know certainly with the Yankees, even when both teams were struggling, in my lifetime, let's say in the expansion era, more likely the 69 expansion on through the 70s before the Yankees started winning World Series again, it was still an intense rivalry, between those two teams. Those two teams have just never really liked each other. They're 7-0 against the Toronto Blue Jays. And that drives Blue Jay fans crazy, because you have to remember, especially in Eastern Canada, we're talking Quebec, New Brunswick, the Maritime provinces, you've probably got a 50-50 mix between Red Sox fans and Blue Jay fans, scattered across the population, at least for old-time baseball fans like myself. I mean, the kids, I think, go with whoever the hot player is, and that's who they want to root for. I mean, it's what kids do. I rooted for the Seattle Pilots in 1969. I kind of cheated on my Red Sox and then, rooted for the Pilots, before morphing after Yaz retired into more of a Blue Jays fan, a Blue Jays follower. If I had to say there's an American League team that I barrack for, it's the Toronto Blue Jays. Guilty as charged. I will try not to have that slant enter into AL slash lines, any of the topics or whatever it is. But there is that underlying current coming from me. I think it's really important that any podcast host or sports reporter, if they have a specific fandom, I think it's important to put it out there. And I think the better ones do. They don't hide the fact that they're rooting for whatever team that it might be. The white whale for the Red Sox is still the Rays. So excusing the nautical puns there. They're 1-7 against Tampa Bay. One of the reasons where I'm saying they're not going to catch Tampa Bay or Baltimore. Even if they had, they have fewer games left with Tampa Bay than just about any other team. I mean, they've got some shots, at taking advantage of the Blue Jays again and the Orioles and the Yankees, down the stretch. But the fact that they have fared so well in the division, that's another piece of the puzzle that the players in their minds and the fan base, as they're watching, this team evolve and develop, that's like, well, wait a minute. We're in this. Yeah, okay, we've struggled here or struggled there, and we've had injuries. You can make up all kind of excuses. But against the AL East, we have a winning record for the most part. If you take out Tampa Bay, they definitively have a winning record. It kind of evens things up, when you factor in their games against Tampa Bay so far. So it'll be the Red Sox are perhaps, I don't want to say they're the most interesting team to follow here leading up to the deadline and then beyond. I do believe that they're going to make noise. And if for some reason, they struggle a little bit going up to the deadline and they do move some veteran pieces and try to bring in some younger players to give them, some stability. I mean, they've already done that, with Yu Chang saying you're going to play shortstop basically every day. I'm not sure that's worked out very well or the way they envisioned, but they want these players to prove they're part of the solution, not a possible problem down the road. So if the Red Sox go that route, it doesn't mean that they're going to roll over and die for these other AL East teams. The Red Sox are good enough. I don't think it's I don't want to say it's too far-fetched to say that all 5 teams in the American League East are going to finish at 500 or above. I think that there's a distinct possibility there because there are teams that are struggling, especially in the AL Central. So, there are possibilities. Then we have the Kansas City Royals. And it's hard to believe that, the Royals were in, back-to-back World Series and, they produced just prodigious talent through their farm system. MJ Melendez, Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, who unfortunately is out for the year. And I'd imagine that he'll be coming back early in 2024. I'm not sure he's going to be 100% when spring training comes around and the season kicks off. So you look at all of that and say, well, what happened? What happened really is a complete, with the ownership change, there became a complete change in philosophy as far as how the team needs to be constructed, how it needs to develop players going forward, even with all the valuable pieces they have. I thought Dayton Moore did a tremendous job. I still don't understand that, but with J.J. Piccolo, Moore was always, and the Royals were always, one of the vanguards for analytics and relying on analytics and projections to tell you how you're going to put a winning team and a World Series team together. Sitting in the dugout, they brought Mike Matheny over. When they made the changes that they did, bringing in, Matt to manage the team and to have Piccolo now take over as the GM, they are going to go in the small market, head-on Tampa Bay model, where they're going to rely on development and they're going to rely on analytics more than they are scouting or what a lot of other teams think they should do as far as building their team, or the strategies that they followed building past teams, within the last decade or so. And I think they tipped their hand about how they're going to do it when they traded Aroldis Chapman. The return is not, on the surface, perhaps, wait a minute, it's Aroldis Chapman. First of all, you have to remember, this is not the Aroldis Chapman that was so dominant for Yankees World Series teams and Cubs World Series teams anymore. He's had a nice bounce back. There's no denying that. He's had a real nice bounce back. But let's be honest, he's older. He's not a closer anymore. He's more of a seventh, eighth inning leverage reliever kind of performer. But that's what contending teams are dying for. So when the Rangers, whose bullpen had been doing so well, considering how many innings they had to pitch, started showing cracks, they went out and they made a deal here. So Cole Reagans has spent some time in the Rangers bullpen. I do believe that I want to say he was a Comp A pick, if I'm not mistaken. I know he was a supplemental first round pick, for the Rangers. They have traded for and developed and drafted so many other young pitchers. He was relatively expendable. He was not going to be a guy that was going to be a long-term rotation piece, not in Texas. So this is a guy that could step into that. They gave him some time in the minors, but he was called up to start one of the games of a doubleheader, on the first Saturday after the All-Star break. He may take his lumps. He certainly did at times, pitching bulk innings, for Texas. But he's a guy that you can see taking the ball every fifth day. Is he a front of the rotation guy? No, and I don't think you would expect a team to give up that for Aroldis Chapman. For Scott Barlow, we'll talk about him in just a little bit. Maybe so, but not necessarily for Aroldis Chapman at this stage of his career. So I think Reagan is going to help the Royals, even if he's not there when the Royals are truly competitive again. He is going to assume a role in that starting rotation that's going to help bridge the stormy times that the Royals are going through here in 2023, and will probably go through again to a lesser degree in 2024. They'll be healthier. They're going to have some pieces come in here at the deadline. But, Reagan's, for Chapman, just for that, I would say, okay, that's a pretty good deal. I mean, they're kind of rolling the dice. Maybe they could have held out, got more or whatever. But I mean, they struck when the right pieces were added. And where they tipped their hand is bringing in a 17-year-old Dominican prospect. He's now in his second season in the Dominican Summer League, Ronnie Cabrera. He's 17. Okay, yes, this is his second year of pro ball, but he's 17. He hasn't even pitched, at low A, high A. He hasn't even gotten there yet. He was the key to this deal. He signed relatively cheaply. I think it was only a $10,000 international bonus pool amount that it was assigned to his signing. But by all accounts, he has just been turning heads, in both of his outings there, in the Dominican Summer League. That's what the Royals are going to look for, at least as far as when it comes to trading Scott Barlow. Because there's two pieces left in the Royals system that they could really expect a haul back from. In the exhibition season, I thought Amir Garrett could be one of those guys, but he did not pitch well in Kansas City. He's now since been designated for assignment, and I believe, as you would be listening to this podcast, he will have been released and free to sign somewhere else. But Scott Barlow is the guy that's going to bring the most pieces. Because if you're a team that is not comfortable with their closer, he has proved that he can pitch the ninth inning, that he can save games even for a relatively hopeless team like the Royals are this year. But based on what you're looking at here, my guess is that Barlow is going to go to a team that has a deep farm system. Let's say the Padres. I mean, pick your poison here. A team that has the Astros certainly could use him, even though their bullpen is one of the best in baseball. He's a guy that can bring back young, projectable players that are still many years away, that would be ready, let's say, in 4 years or 5 years, at best case scenario, maybe 3 years. That's going to be the return. That's where they're going to clean up. If the Royals are willing to accept a return similar to what they did from the Rangers for Aroldis Chapman, I think that the Royals are going to have direct impact on a pennant race in some league or some division. Might not be the AL Central, but in some league or division when they move Barlow. And now that sets them up where, let's say 2 years from now, let's say they start showing signs of life, they're going to have an even greater stockpile of high-level, high-ceiling prospects that they can then deal for veteran pieces to supplement a team that might be starting to show signs of life and being competitive again in the AL Central. But where the Royals can change not only their immediate future and destiny, but also have the largest impact on a pennant race, I think, is trading Salvador Perez to Miami. Salvador Perez is a franchise icon. For me, thinking about trading Salvador Perez, if I'm a Royals fan, is like saying, well, we should have traded George Brett. But keep in mind, this is a team and a franchise that has traded guys like David Cohn and Brett Saberhagen. They've let him go. Equally as impactful, but still, I mean, the Royals, it's not like this hasn't happened in Royals history. But we're not talking history, we're talking the present. So when we're talking the present, Salvador Perez to the Marlins makes sense on so many levels. It immediately transforms that Marlins lineup, lengthens it, gives a reliable big bat in the middle of that order. And the Marlins, who are already in second place in the NL East and have one of the best records in baseball already, Now people have to take them serious. They're going to probably have to do it as a wild card, but how have the Marlins won their World Series? 97 and 2003, they were wild card, and they made it to the World Series. So it's not, again, it's sort of like history maybe repeating itself. I'm not ready to go that far, and this is an AL podcast. It's not an NL podcast. But they could hold out. I mean, they could hold the Marlins ransom for two legitimate number 2 or number 3 starters, whether they be not necessarily in the majors now, but really close. The Marlins may have the deepest pitching depth of any organization, with the exception of maybe the Rays. But I would even say that the Marlins have more major league ready arms than the Rays do, and the Rays have a tremendous farm system. So if the Royals make a deal with Salvador Perez for 2 legitimate MLB ready or near MLB ready starting pitchers, now that long-term plan rebuilding the system is on a faster track. Plus, Ann Eng, GM of the Marlins, also is of a more analytical slant. She and J.J. Piccolo are going to be able to negotiate on a level that they both feel comfortable. So that's something to look for. I mean, I think the Royals are going to be a big story leading up to the trade deadline. So that's why you need to pay attention to them. Okay, they're in last place, fine. Okay, they're on the verge of maybe setting records for runs allowed as well. But it's okay. Not major league record, franchise record. But still, the Royals are going to beat players. You know who else could actually bring in some nice pieces and position player depth? Let's say, I don't know. Let's say the Cincinnati Reds. You don't think the Cincinnati Reds would want Ryan Yarbrough taking the ball every 5th day? The Reds, as great a story as they are, they need starting pitching. They're not going to make it through the playoffs. I think they're going to get into the playoffs, but not going to make it through a deep run of the playoffs unless they address their starting pitching, their starting rotation. I'll give Ryan Yarbrough, the ball and make him my 4th or 5th starter. And then, he's proved himself. He's been terrific since he came back from injury after that little scare that he had. He's been terrific. He has a track record with the Rays. And then, for the Reds, they can slide him into the bullpen come the playoffs when you only need 3 starters. So a lot of interesting things are going to come out of Kansas City. So you need to pay attention to them. That's why we're looking at the cellar dwellers. Okay. And I'm not saying that in a derisive way or trying to put, those teams down or upset the fan bases of the Red Sox and the Royals and the team we're going to talk about coming up next, the Oakland Athletics. It's important to pay attention because potentially, if you're a fan of an American League team, what the Royals do could directly impact you. So I think it's really important to see what they're going to do. It's time to talk about the Oakland Athletics. And let's be honest, the A's are the Oakland Athletics in name only. And everybody knows they're moving to Las Vegas. Okay, I mean, they've already got the agreement with Nevada's governor and their legislature. They're going to build a ballpark down at the end of the Strip. They are going to, in essence, replace their AAA team, which is now at Las Vegas, in a brand new ballpark, and they're going to finally generate revenues that they never could imagine, even if they had gotten that waterfront ballpark that all the uber political correct politicians just refused because they had all of these conditions that just didn't make it feasible. So they're the Las Vegas Athletics. You need to call them Oakland for a while because they're going to play at least the 2024 season there. I don't think the ballpark is going to be ready until 2025. But again, you're playing in Las Vegas. You're not going to have a whole lot of rain issues you need to worry about delaying construction. It doesn't get that cold in the winter, not in southern Nevada where Las Vegas is. So, I mean, if you're building it in Tahoe or something, okay, you're going to have tough winters to deal with. You're not going to deal with that in Las Vegas. You're going to have the ideal construction situation. This ballpark should be completed in 2025. barring labor issues or other things that come up, everything should be locked up. And I hate to say this, Oakland fans, and East Bay baseball fans and all, this is great for the franchise's survival. It is great for Major League Baseball. And quite honestly, I think it's great for everybody but that core 25% of the population that were loyal, hardcore, devoted, and now brokenhearted Oakland A's support. And for me, growing up as I did, in the late 60s, and 70s, it's hard to fathom the Oakland A's not being the favorite team of the Bay Area. I mean, sure, the San Francisco Giants were there first, but a lot of you forget Candlestick, the crowds after that 71 NL West division win, the crowds in San Francisco were non-existent. Players hated playing in that place. Fans certainly didn't want to sit there in the cold and the fog and all the other stuff to watch a baseball game, especially a baseball game featuring a losing team. The San Francisco Giants came within a court injunction issued by a judge in January of 1976 of being the Toronto Giants. The deal was signed. Everything was in place. And a California judge issued an injunction and forced the Giants to stay. They eventually, sold the team from the Stoneham family. They sold the team in time. They got a new ballpark. That took a while as well. But, and then the mid to late 80s, the Giants were going to World Series, and they were a great hitting team. They were exciting. Roger Craig and all of that. People forget that the Giants were second-class citizens. Once Oakland moved there in 1968 from Kansas City, the Giants were second-class citizens, primarily because the last real dynasty in Major League Baseball. And Yankee fans, yes, you can send your hate mail to slasherbaseball@yahoo.com. Go ahead. The last real dynasty in the American League was those Oakland A's teams, 72, 73, 74. So to have this happen to this franchise, it's hard for me to wrap my head around it. But you talk about Moneyball. This is Billy Beane's greatest achievement. Yes, he has a voice, and I'm sure he has veto power over baseball ops moves or trades or whatever. But this is David Forst and Mark Kotze's team. It really is. I mean, it's more David Forst than Mark Kotze, but I think they're grooming Kotze for better things when the A's start turning it around. So now I've been talking about all these negative things about the team moving and not drawing, and all of these. Their records. What have they given up? Close to 600 runs already, and we're only in the middle of July. It's hard, perhaps, to say, well, why am I even thinking about following the Oakland A's? They're terrible. They are slowly but surely bringing in their major league ready prospects to start their journey as major league regulars. I thought they did a really smart thing adding Brent Rooker. Yes, he's had a slump, but they have Ruiz, the exciting outfielder. They've got a lot of really young pieces. None of them better than Tyler Soderstrom, who came up just after the All-Star break. He's a catcher / first baseman. I'd imagine he's going to see most of his time at catcher. Why did the A's let Sean Murphy go? Why did they move him? Because they had Tyler Soderstrom. Everybody thought he was going to UCLA, and he just fell in the A's lap. And I think they picked, I want to say 26th in that draft in 2020. It may have been a little earlier, but for some reason I want to say it was the 26th pick. It was certainly a pick in the 20s. Nobody thought he would be there. And they paid way above slot value to convince Soderstrom not to play baseball at UCLA and start his professional baseball career as an 18-year-old. And he, by all accounts, has not disappointed what the A's thought they had in him and what any scout that was urging their teams to draft him. He does have 20 homers at AAA already. Yes, it's a lighter air situation in Las Vegas. It's a very hitter-friendly situation, in that Pacific Coast League. But he's for real. And the best thing about Soderstrom is that he asks questions. He seeks out advice. He doesn't just play off his talent and hope eventually things. He wants to get better. He has developed enough as a game caller and as a pitch framer that he's going to be average defensively as a catcher. I don't think they care. I think they would put a pitch back behind home plate if it meant that his bat was in the lineup. His debut was as a designated hitter, but eventually he's going to see reps at catcher. He'll see some reps at first base. As the pieces that Force has put together in the sell-off and the teardown of this Oakland franchise leading up to this sale, there's players that are going to follow. These are not the only two. They did also bring up Get Up. I'm not 100% sure what to think about him. He certainly has the potential to be a leadoff hitter or a top of the lineup piece. I think he's a good base runner. He's decent defensively. He certainly has the bloodlines. I want to see him play first, and I don't get to see a lot of Oakland A's baseball. I have to be very honest with you. I haven't watched them much. To me, it's almost like slowing down to watch if there's any victims in a car wreck. I mean, it's been that kind of season, for the A's. So I've watched a lot of games, in snippets, the little game in 30 type situations. But I'm going to start watching them because I think them bringing up Soderstrom and Gadoff and some of the other pieces that they have in place, this is what Billy Beane has been building toward. This is his crowning achievement. Forget Moneyball and all that stuff. Him finally securing a home for the Oakland A's franchise that he truly loves. Even with all the over-dramatizations and, the overrating chants you hear a lot about Billy Beane, he loves the A's organization. He loves this team. He has been focusing for the last 6 to 10 years more on getting a ballpark and getting a home where this team can flourish and be great again. There's still a lot of, great people in the organization. Kubota, the scouting director, does a terrific job. So that's why you need to pay attention to the Oakland Athletics. Put aside for a second they're moving. Put aside for a second fan protest or no fans in the stands or whatever it would be. You need to focus on what the A's bringing up these young guys and letting them learn on the job, if you will, accept their struggles, because when they move into that new ballpark in that new city, this is what the A's have been building for the last 2 years. Tearing it down, adding as many good young pieces as they can, drafting well like they always do, so that when they go to Las Vegas, they can be a sensation similar to the Vegas Golden Knights, the expansion team that moved into Las Vegas. So it's something to think about. Speaking of the A's, before we go, let's wrap up this opening day of AL slash lines, if you will, with some history homework. Now, most podcast hosts don't assign homework to you. You're going to enjoy this assignment. Okay, this isn't something where you got to sweat and lose sleep over your grade. This isn't pass fail. You fail if you don't follow my advice here of what to do. Look up video of the 1971 All-Star Game, specifically Reggie Jackson's catapult shot that is estimated of having gone 539 feet. It was hit so high and far, NBC's cameras couldn't even react in time to follow the ball up, because it should have cleared Tiger Stadium, but it hit a light fixture. Some say that is the inspiration for that scene in The Natural. That Reggie Jackson home run is so iconic. And say what you will about Reggie Jackson. I hated Reggie Jackson as a kid, as a player. There's something about him. But you can't deny the results. And you had Hall of Fame players like Al Kaline, Mr. Tiger, Harmon Killebrew, Carl Yastrzemski, and Frank Howard. Frank Howard, who was infamous for moonshots when he was a Dodger coming up as a young player, and then all his time with the Senators. The only guy that I saw prior to that Jackson home run that I can remember hitting balls farther and harder on a regular basis was maybe Willie Stargell of the Pirates. So capital punishment, Frank Howard and all the guys I just mentioned said that was the hardest hit home run they had ever seen. These are all Hall of Famers, many of them like Killebrew and Howard, that hit prodigious home runs. And for those of you that will watch this video and say, well, it didn't go out of Tiger Stadium, not many balls were hit out of Tiger Stadium. But to make up for the fact that the light tower blocked the estimated 583-foot home run. And I've been in Tiger Stadium when it was still there as a kid and as a young man. That shot to that light tower was more like 600 plus feet. I don't want to say they downplayed it, but it adds to the legend, I guess. But for those of you that might feel sorry that Reggie Jackson got cheated out of hitting a ball out of Tiger Stadium in a home run, in an All-Star game, he did hit a ball out of Tiger Stadium in 1984 when he was with the Angels. So that's your homework assignment until next week. AL/Lines is going to drop new episodes every weekend from now till you guys get sick of me. But we're a part of the Slasher Sports family. You can find us on Slasher Sports Baseball YouTube channel, also our Spotify feed. It's sort of like a bookend to our National League Central coverage of Central Intelligence. Go to slashersports.com and you can get all sorts of information about all of the offerings we have. We have baseball, as you see here, college football, Christian Rao and Slasher U. I get to contribute to that at times as well. You have Slasher Sports Cinema with Billy Graves, and you have Suki Suburbia's Honeydew Project. So we've got cinema, lifestyle, college sports, baseball, all sorts of offerings. Also join our Discord community, the Slasher Sports Discord community. Some great conversations going on there. I'm Steve Heck. I'll be back with you again next weekend. And it's going to be a great race to the finish in the AL. Make sure you stay tuned with us to get all of the juicy details.